Hey, it's me, LH Music. I'm back, you know what I'm saying? Welcome to my religious life video blog. And you know why it's gotta be the 15th Sunday after Pentecost? Now here's your obsolete words, but you might think it's so right to learn how to forgive and forget and whatever it is you forgive about this one. So who knows? Here's a thing for this one on Matthew chapter 18 verses 21 through 35 says, Then Peter came and said to him, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times. Jesus said to him, Not 7 times, but I tell you, 70 times 7. 77 times. Sounds like Christian CCM group, Christian CCM rock group, Whiteheart says how many times? 70 times 7. You know what I'm saying. But anyways, going on. Oh yes. Now here is for information about this reason. It is about this parable. It's called the parable of unforgiving servant. Because for this reason, I'm on verse 23. Now, for this reason, the kingdom of heaven may compare to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves. When he began the reckoning, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him, and he couldn't pay. His Lord ordered him to be sold together with his wife and children and all his possessions, and payment to be made. So the slave fell on his knees before him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And out of pity for him, the Lord of that slave released him and forgave him the debt. But that same slave, as he went out, came upon one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii, and seizing him by the throat. Uh-oh. Could be life-threatening, isn't it? Here's your worst nightmare. Here's what he said. Pay what you owe. Then his fellow slave fell down and pleaded with him, Have patience with me, and I will pay you. But he refused. Then he went and threw him into prison until he should pay the debt. And when his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their Lord, all that had taken place. Then the Lord summoned him and said to him, You wicked slave! I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you? And in anger, his Lord handed him over to be tortured until he should pay his entire debt. So my Heavenly Father will also do to every one of you, if you do not forgive your brother or sister from your heart. That's the thing that the Reverend Ellie, she's one of our guest priests at my church. told a huge sermon about the unforgiving servant, and says, where were you on 9/11 during her sermons this morning at my church, and I cannot believe my eyes and ears. This is gonna be huge. So this is what happens about an unforgiving servant, because this is what happens. Happens because you know why? Because here's a thing to this one. Because just as Luke, a doctor, we'll talk about Matthew and money, all that. It gives you descriptive accounts of a physical healings. So Matthew, yes, a former tax collector. If you pay your taxes, whatever you want, I have no objections. Just to pay your taxes. I'm not talking about tax reform or anyone being civilized. I'm talking about a tax collector in the book of Matthew. Because highlight stories about, money. Because this story in chapter 18, because it's the same thing as Matthew chapters, could be a chapter of, chapters 20 and 25. And that's why it appears in this gospel reading. And it significantly form a tax collector's record that Jesus has a strong words on treatment of the poor and needy. This is going to be, outrageous. Outrageous, and you know why. Here's why. Here's why I even understand why these things about chapter 18 and, because here's a theological explanation about this one, about now, because all the workplaces try experiencing the conflict, and you know what, in this passage Jesus gives us a template for dealing with someone who has wronged us. And that's why he didn't say, get even or strike back. But instead, he lays out the process. And it begins with seeking one-on-one to be reconciled. And that's why the beatitude of meekness should be, you guessed it, putting all things aside, for self-justification. And that is why, just for your information, to long enough to express yourself respectfully and factually to the one who has hurt you, and open yourself to their perspective. It doesn't mean that submitting to further abuse, to open your heart, open your mind, open your soul to yourself, to the possibility that that your perception is not universal. And you know why? Because universal, but suppose that doesn't solve the conflict. And because here's why. Conflicts. And that's why the fallback second step is to ask people that who know you both to go with you as you take upon this issue again with the person who caused everybody's pain or should we say injury. And if the conflict is still resolving to bring this to a matter, to this leadership, And you know what? It has addressing to these conflicts specifically, and for impartial judgment. And if that judgment doesn't resolve this whole issue, the offender who fails to abide by the judgment to remove from the community. So it happens. So what is so bad about this whole conflict? Could be out of bondage, or it could be legalism. Because legalist, you know this comes from this one. Because like I said on Matthew chapter 18 verse 35 says, "This is how my heavenly Father would treat of you unless you forgive your brother or sister or from your heart." Because legalists, people who follow strict the rules to conduct, because at first glance seem righteous, but Jesus warns against the subtle dangers of legalism. Well, guess what? Oddly, legalism tends to lower a person's view of God. And if I manage this, as far as we're concerned, to meet all the requirements of a strict rule book, and that's why I may begin to feel secure about my goodness. And in fact, I may even think that I have earned God's approval to my own efforts. Now, both of these. Now, take for instance, both Jesus' enemies to the Pharisees. That means the Pharisees and his friends, the disciples, tried to seek this precise list of rules so they can feel they have fulfilled their obligations to God, and then gives them a sense of satisfaction. And that's why to the people, such people, Jesus shouts with a loud voice, "No! We'll never outgrow our need for God. We never arrived in this Christian life. We survive spiritually only a constant depending on God for mercy and for strength." Here's why. So here's why it happens. Because everybody knows that pointing out all the faults is a two-way street, and we need to be open to hear those faults. Try to pointing out to us as well. Listening. Jesus mentions listening 3 times in these 3 verses. It's a crucial element. Contemporary conflict resolution models usually focusing on getting the parties to listen to each other, and even while preserving the option to disagree, or shall we say agreeable or disagreeable, whatever it is. And often to attentive listening leads to this discovery of a mutual acceptance resolution. And now you know it happens. Because the moral of this religious life video blog story in this 15th Sunday after Pentecost is that if it doesn't work that way, then the others, with the appropriate skills and the authority, are asked to get involved. Because to make this long story short, Jesus always refused this. Lowers the sights. And that's why he It opposes every form of legalism, of every human attempt to accumulate a list of credits. And the credit goes out to God. Yes, goes out to God. Not for us, to God. And that's why the chief is still in danger facing legalists, is that they risk missing the good news of God's grace and that gift freely given by God to all the people. Well, doesn't deserve it. Sounds simple to you? So ask this question. Have you ever found it hard to someone to forgive when he or she said, had done the same thing repeatedly? Think about it. And that's my religious life video blog story, and I'm sticking to it.